Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Adam Winters, the old man himself. I'm Joe Gould, the one with no nickname. And we're watching Doctor Strange from 1978. Well, I tell you what, this movie, they could have used some Dr. Pepper in this movie.
How much? 15 bottles?
I think every day when they came on the set, they needed that magical concoction of Dr. Pepper. They didn't have Dr. Pepper Zero back in 1978. That would have been my preference. And the pacing of this movie was a little off.
So I fell asleep, I forget how many times. I think it was when people were having the dream sequences. Something about flashbacks and dream sequences put me to sleep when I'm watching a movie.
Boy, I tell you what, some of these scenes with the kind of the psychedelic nature to them, I don't know if I was tired how long I would make it. Talk about like white noise in the background.
But there's not enough of them either for a movie like this. I felt like they should have done more.
The thing is, you thought they were. You load this sucker up and you watch the first couple minutes of the credits and then the opening scene, and you think to yourself, man, I'm going to see some wild stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
And then it turned into General Hospital.
I've never seen that show. Do you want to elaborate on that point?
Well, I've never seen the show either, but it felt like a soap opera in a hospital setting, so it seemed appropriate. It was definitely not as interesting as Grey's Anatomy. I've been forced to sit through a few of those episodes.
There was a lot more hospital drama than I expected in this movie. In fact, I would dare say Morgan Le Fay is not the big bad of this movie. It's that incompetent visiting director, and the 20-year head nurse. They're the real villains of the movie.
You know, the head nurse kind of came around.
Did she? What'd she do?
When skipping ahead I'm not sure how we're going to review this exactly, we talked about it. But skipping ahead to when Dr. Strange had given the order not to let the lady sleep, and then the other guy
or the medication,
gave the tranquilizer.
Right? We're talking about
right.
That was the order.
So, but what I'm saying is, once the lady almost died after being given the tranquilizer drugs, the nurse lady seemed to come around to say, okay, maybe this Doctor Strange isn't quite the idiot I thought he was.
He is a bit of a playboy, though.
Well, not with her.
In her defense,
no one's going to be a playboy with her.
If you judge Dr. Strange by how he interacts with the younger nurses, at least one of them early in this movie, I can see why the head nurse would roll her eyes at him periodically. But at the same time, he's still the doctor, and she's the nurse. So
I've never really been a South Park watcher. Maybe these days, I like it more as I get older.
I don't watch much of it.
I might like it. I might like it more now. But I do remember the line. I think it's Cartman, the fat kid, who says, "Respect my authority."
Yes,
and she had those kind of vibes going on. Like, I've been here 20 years. Respect my authority. And Dr. Strange is like, you don't have any.
Yeah, he's the doctor. And I'm not quite sure what he's a doctor of, because he works in the psychiatric ward. But he prescribes a lot of medicines. And I just don't know enough about that branch of medical science. I felt like they would be more segregated in 1978. The psychiatric ward and the actual, whatever you want to call it, the traditional medication, family doctor, whatever else. But
yeah, my gut says that is the result of the 60s and 70s drug culture coming out.
Right.
They thought it'd be a little more fun to have him be a psych. And I will say, I've not read a single Doctor Strange comic. It's probably one of the few series I've really not even dabbled in at all. So, I don't know. I know he's supposed to be a surgeon who lost the ability to do surgery because he got his hands messed up. And that is obviously not in this movie.
Is that comic lore, the hand injury? Is that really not just the movie they did recently?
Let me pull up that Google machine. I left it out.
Because they could always retcon the lore too, but way back in the day, when Stan Lee was working on it.
Yeah. All right, this is straight from Wikipedia. That seems accurate. Despite his reputation for being able to handle even the most complicated surgical procedures, Strange is self-centered and greedy, and only treats patients who can afford to pay his exorbitant fees. One night, while speeding in his car, a terrible accident shatters the bones in his hands, leading to extensive nerve damage. He soon finds that his fingers tremble uncontrollably, rendering him unable to perform surgery. Too vain to accept a teaching job, Strange desperately searches for a way to fix his hands, and to death, he wastes all of his money on expensive and unsuccessful treatments. It's funny how sometimes you just have the inability to say one particular word, even though you've said it a million times in the past.
Buford Pusser. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Yeah. I haven't got to editing that one yet. I'm still undecided.
Well.
Shall we go with a bleep or a complete whitewash? But
whatever you feel like. There are cats in this movie. Plenty of, I'd say more kitties in this movie than Captain America 2 Deaths Too Soon. At least 2 different kittens.
Yeah, it was that first one seemed way too well trained.
The orange cat, Calico, whatever.
The one that walked right into the electric field.
Poor cat. Morgan Le Fay.
How do you green screen a cat screech?
Yeah, you wonder. No animals were harmed in this production. I didn't look to see at the end of this.
I think they were able to harm and injure whatever they wanted to back in 1978. So maybe it had a shot collar on it.
If they'd have filmed it in Japan, definitely you'd get away with anything. If you film it in Japan. Milo and Otis. You can watch that one.
Such a good movie. Such a good movie.
Great. It is fantastic. But there's a reason why the scenes look so good. They're really real. Animals in danger.
Yeah. So anyways, this movie does not follow what I just read. Instead, he's a psychiatrist at the hospital treating weirdos, and he loves them and does not charge them money.
Yeah.
And he's looked down upon by some of his colleagues for being too generous with the rooms. They want to preserve the rooms.
Yeah, there's only like 8 of them, aren't there? Or the beds, right? The beds specifically, not so much the individual rooms.
I didn't catch the exact number. Okay. Well, I'll say, so the movie was 1978. It was made for television. Philip DeGuire directed it, and he wrote it, and he produced it with Alex Beaton and Gregory Hoblit. Stan Lee did work on the film as a consultant. He enjoyed his time with this. He enjoyed it more than he did with a lot of the other made-for-TV Marvel stuff he worked with, because CBS didn't really get in the way. They were able to kind of do what they wanted to. And it starred Peter Hooten as Doctor Strange. Also had Jessica Walter as the main, I guess not the main villain, so to speak, but the main one on screen.
Morgan Le Fay. By the way, one of the few characters that exist in both DC and Marvel lore.
I'm not surprised, because I know it is a historical thing and a real world kind of myth or whatever.
Yeah, the Arthurian legend. But so Morgan Le Fay, I looked it up. Her Marvel history dates back to the Atlas Comics era, and it's not Doctor Strange or whatever. It's a comic called, I think, The Black Knight, which I think I own on Amazon Comixology, but I've never read it. But she was reintroduced just in time for the movie in probably May of 1978. And it was in, what comic do you think it was? What Marvel title?
I did look some of that up. Was it the Avengers?
Nope. She became an Avengers villain, but she was reintroduced in Spider-Woman of all comics.
Oh yeah, I remember that now.
And I guess Dr. Fate started in the 60s. So the DC version of Morgan Le Fay, which is spelled different, was invented by Jack Kirby. And I don't remember what comic he introduced her in. So there you go.
Okay. Old Kirby.
Yep. He made DC respectable when he went over there. No, they didn't feature him near like they should have, but he gave them lore that they didn't have.
You know, I ain't convinced his DC work is all that great. Just to be clear. Perhaps he is the artist who needs to be reined in by someone who understands capitalism. But I never really cared for his DC work.
Well, I'd say less the comics, but more the fact that he added the lore to DC that they didn't have. Sort of an overarching mythology and something that would really tie all their cosmic threats together. I don't know if you remember it, the introduction of Darkseid, he's literally just hanging out in an alley. That's your first look at Darkseid. He's kind of hiding behind a building. Well, whatever.
Yeah. So a couple other main characters, Clyde Kusatsu. I have no idea how to pronounce that.
Who is
Clyde something plays Wong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then John Mills plays Thomas Lindmer.
Is he a comics character?
No, I don't think so. I think he's supposed to be like an off-brand ancient one. That's kind of who they act like he is. Though we do have that voiceover at the end of the movie. But he kind of plays the role of the ancient one.
He's like, he has the line, he's a couple hundred years too old to be okay. Something like that.
Yeah. He's too old for this bleep. But,
thank you, Danny Glover.
Yeah.
He was too old for that stuff back in 1989, wasn't he?
That guy, he just looked the same age for 25 years.
Yeah, him and Steve Martin and Paul Rudd. They reach a certain age, they stay there.
Well, I would say Glover looked old, though, back when he was young.
Oh, he
Paul
was too
Rudd
old
just
for that.
Looks young.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's probably, 30?
Well, Paul Rudd was doing Super Nintendo commercials when Danny Glover was too old for that stuff.
All right. So anyways, it was going to be a pilot for proposed television series. It didn't get picked up. Got destroyed in the ratings by Roots. It aired on September 6, 1978. I worked a lot. I worked very hard to figure out what the actual ratings were for this movie. And it left me walking away thinking questioning all things in my life. So I could not find the rating. I could find absolutely nothing for that month in 1978.
Not even
some
Roots?
daytime soap operas. Well, no. And then I look up Roots, and Roots aired in 1977, starting in February. It's like
So
a
this is
6-part thing.
Was this the second Roots, or I forget how they?
Well, I'm not an expert on Roots, but the second Roots came out in 1979.
Uh-oh. Huh.
So maybe it was a re-release. So in 1977, Roots got a 40.5 to a 45 rating, depending on the night, which was a 65 to 70% share and 32 million viewers.
Pretty good.
So, yeah, that's nuts. That's Super Bowl kind of numbers. So I don't know if maybe they re-aired it in 78. Television's different back then. It still would have popped a big rating. I would imagine not quite that high.
Nobody was buying it on VHS in 78 because I assume it didn't exist.
No. So assuming that they did a re-air, I'm sure it did obliterate Doctor Strange. And it makes you think that CBS wasn't really that excited with the movie or the idea of a series, and they just wanted to silently bury it, which would make sense because for the next 10 years, I think the movie probably just developed a reputation of being a bad movie because it had no home release until like late 80s. They had a couple of VHS runs.
Oh, it did come out on tape. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. I'm sure there weren't very many of them. So it was released twice on VHS in the US in 1987 and then 1995. Had some foreign releases too. And then Shout Factory released it on DVD. I forget the year. That's what I'm watching. Looking for the date on here.
You got to tell us about that Shout Factory DVD. High quality release.
So, talk about bare bones. They didn't spend a lot of money on this DVD. You can still get it in limited quantities, I believe. They did release a limited edition Blu-ray a couple of years ago. They had some actual special features on it, and I think it quickly sold out. So I don't know what it runs on the eBay. Yeah, if I had realized they had done that, I would have looked for it on eBay before I purchased this one. I do like the special features, so I can get them. But I never went back and checked. Cheap plastic case, cheap printing art, low quality picture. Like they could do so well when they try, and they did not try on this one.
I guess the insert is double-sided, if that makes any difference.
Back in the days when you got inserts.
Yes. Well, I say insert, the cover. The cover is, the case is transparent, so the cover art is double-sided.
Okay. Let's see here. Are you familiar with a Gary Stu?
Sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you anything about Stu.
So one of the reviews that was critiquing the movie said that Doctor Strange, the character, was a bit of a Gary Stu.
Oh.
And I guess what that means is, quote, he's instantly good at everything without any training. Only fails once before miraculously being awesome immediately afterwards, and he's generally just an idiot. He's also barely there as a figure. So I agree with the assessment. I don't get the Gary Stu reference.
No, I do.
I probably should.
That's the male version of a Mary Sue. You've heard of that, right? Because we got a lot of Mary Sues in movies today.
I don't know. Maybe I'd...
You know, like Rey Skywalker Palpatine, she's a Mary Sue, more or less. She just...
Well, I get that. I get the critique. I understand what they're saying, and I've heard that before. But the actual name itself...
Well, I don't know where they got it from. But it's the male version of Mary Sue.
Who's the Prime character? What in the Prime universe, who is this person?
Huh. That's the story for another day.
Google.
I guess I agree. He is a bit of a Gary Stu. I'm not sure why he succeeds in this movie, other than the plot mandates that he must.
All right. So I'm looking at the Wikipedia on the Mary Sue, which agrees with everything. Apparently, it doesn't have to be a Gary Stu. It can also be a Marty Stu. Originating from fan fiction, the term Mary Sue was coined by Paula Smith in the 1973 parody short story A Trekkie's Tale, as the name of a character standing in for idealized female characters widespread in Star Trek fan fiction.
Ugh.
All right, so I don't feel so bad about not getting that reference now.
Which one came first, male or the female reference?
The female. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it came out of like a magazine review. It's like, whatever. Okay. So I did like the movie. I know I've critiqued it a lot already, but I find it hard to dislike. Let's put it this way. It was moving so slowly, I felt no need to watch it a second time because I had so much time to internalize the plot as it went along.
Well.
Now I'm looking at it from a made-for-television post-pilot series, too.
Yeah.
Because if this was not going to be a pilot episode or movie, it definitely would get a different grade at the back end. Like, the whole Lindmere
Thomas,
like he's in this movie way too much. Like his role's too big. But if it's a pilot episode and he's going to spend the rest of the series training Doctor Strange, then it makes a little more sense.
It does.
Executed poorly still, but it makes more sense.
This is another one of these movies we've seen from Universal CBS where the titular hero does not put any recognizable costume on until the last 15 minutes of the film, and then, like the first Captain America we watched, Strange gets a second costume right before the credits, which I presume he would have worn in the series, that I don't like near as much as the one he had on before.
Yeah. So, off to your first point, again, it makes sense if it's a pilot. It kind of sucks as a standalone movie kind of thing. You want to see them in their costume. So, but I get it. I'll give them a pass with the idea of what they were doing. As to the second point, it is very strange that his comic accurate costume was basically the evil version of whatever he could have been.
Yeah.
And then they gave it this makeover. It's like, oh my gosh, this is hideous.
Well, I think that second costume was going to be part of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Linmer tells him. So, do you remember that? Sort of the things he'd have to forsake, whatever word he used, if he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but the comic version of the costume, they made one. They made it. And he doesn't get to use it?
I was curious when Morgan Le Fay gives him the robe. I said, wow, his costume just was a gift from the evil lady. And they even acknowledge that near the end when they do the Santa Claus power transfer. Like, Ernest.
I got a robe. It came from her. And Linmer said, it's good enough.
Yeah.
Like a little sidebar.
And then he materializes very Richard Simmons-esque, whatever, spandex suit, purple with a big big supernova. That's why I said that's his way of saying he's going to forsake ignorance, not bearing, but basically he's not going to be able to.
In general.
He's not going to have any kids wearing something like that.
So I will say this too. It is probably the best thing old Benedict, was it Cumberbatch? How do you pronounce his name?
Cumberbatch, right?
Cumberbatch, yeah.
Cumberbatch.
The new Doctor Strange. It is probably old Sherlock himself. It's probably good for him. The CBS did not pick up this series because if they had picked this up, then they probably would have changed his costume in the comics to the new suit. And either he would have been canceled and long forgotten, or we'd have a very different looking Doctor Strange in the movies today.
Now, I feel like Doctor Strange is quietly one of Stan Lee's favorite characters because Marvel keeps, for so many years, they tried to just push Doctor Strange on the general public. And I don't think the general public was really quite as big on him as Stan Lee was. You remember about 2005 when Marvel was doing all those direct-to-DVD animated films through Lionsgate? Doctor Strange got one of those. Right up there was Iron Man and Thor and Ultimate Avengers and Hulk versus Wolverine. Doctor Strange was in there. He's like the third one they did. I don't know how much it sold.
Yeah, it's interesting. Historically on the sales, I don't know where Doctor Strange would have compared to like Iron Man or S.H.I.E.L.D. with Nick Fury or those level characters. But yeah, you've had a lot of B-level characters kind of get into the main scheme of things in the last 15 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And Doctor Strange, I feel like they did a good job waiting to introduce him at the proper time with the proper actor. He is Benedict, as Tony Stark is Robert Downey Jr. Like, you just need to pull off a character like that. You got to find the right guy. It's the same thing with Wolverine. Like, of course, he was already A-level, but still. It's like, you find the right person for the role. Like, you can make the B-level character an A-level character.
Yep.
But if you don't get that stuff right, you get shit like this. And it's just like, this is the most uncharismatic Doctor Strange. Like, everyone loves the guy. All the women, swoon over him. But you look at the guy and you're like, I mean, he's not ugly or anything, but he's got no personality.
He is pretty
no
slick,
inflection in his voice.
He's pretty slick now. He's got that mustache, that curly hair. You know who he reminds me of?
A porn star.
The oldest of the Brady kids when he grew up and did those TV movies. I don't remember which Brady that was. Bobby? No. Greg Brady.
He plays it with a straight face, but there's like no personality in there. Like, it's like he had a head wound. Like, it's like he came out of a psych ward.
Ooh.
Maybe he's a patient.
I gotta say, I thought it was a little bit weird, his interest in Clea. What's her name? Clea Lake? That's a comic character, apparently. Clea Lake.
Yeah, Clea Lake.
I guess Marvel recently made her a Sorcerer Supreme in the last 4 years when they decided to take all our big names and make them female. So
couldn't tell you though. I mean, obviously they went back to the big 1978 classic here to pull a character out of the rear end. But
Clea Lake.
But she's a good actress. Actually, the supporting characters in this movie have a lot more personality than the main one. Other than Wong. Wong's pretty. I mean, I think he's supposed to act like that, but he's pretty boring.
You wonder how the dynamic between Wong and Lindmer would have been in a series. Because it feels like Wong can adequately do the training of Strange, but Lindmer's there. So are they just going to be redundant on each other?
I don't know. I think you could have had a good couple episodes, maybe a two-parter, where Wong gets jealous and tries to get the ring. This magical, not magical, for whatever reason, ring.
Oh.
I don't know if the ring's like a conduit to all the powers, what? But if I was Wong, I'd be thinking, why can't I be the next Sorcerer Supreme?
You weren't born for it. You don't have the pedigree. It's fate. Not Dr. Fate. That's a DC character. But
I get the feeling that Strange's dad is basically a Wong.
I don't know. It's a good question. So this is again the second of these Universal CBS movies where the father of the titular character is somebody, but we really have no idea. We're just told the father was a big deal, and now the son has to take over.
So actually, this would have been the first, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. This was greenlit before the Captain America stuff. Wow.
The Captain Americas came out in '79, right?
Yes, January and December.
Okay, so this was September of '78. So they were probably actually being written at the same time. Whether they got shot in the same time or not, unclear. But they would have been produced at the same time. Wouldn't you, if you were Marvel, Universal, said, hold up here, quality control, we have the same plot in both our movies, please change one.
Well, they probably knew they were only going to go to series with one of these, if at all. They already had Hulk. They want to get too greedy with the superhero stuff.
But you know what I mean? It's just like, I mean, CBS be paying for it.
Yeah. Maybe that was a strategy. Doctor Strange wasn't so well known that they could get by doing a different kind of show. You know, a hospital romantic drama, but also with magic.
Yeah.
Captain America, he's obviously a superhero action with lots of car crashes.
It would have been very different series, that's for sure. So, quickly going through the plot, I don't want to spend too much time on any particular section. The movie opens with a trippy sequence, and we have this underworld type scene with a red filter, and this evil entity, which I'm assuming is supposed to kind of be an off-brand Dormammu.
Oh.
Is... Huh. I mean, other than that, I don't know who he'd be comparable to. And I don't think they ever name him.
Those sequences are kind of rough, but it's just enough that it could creep some kids out if they just turned the TV on and saw that. And I like that. Just the minimalism.
It looked cheap, but this movie apparently had a pretty decent budget for a TV movie. So I don't know what that means. But it was very strange. And I think I texted you. I said, if I was the kind of person who did drugs, I think I'd enjoy this sequence. Depending on what the drug was, I guess. But so you got this evil entity, which is kind of like, it's definitely not a solid creature. It seems to have eyes, but it tells Morgan Le Fay, who apparently had been prevented from getting through to the Earth realm by a great wizard, that she has 3 days to, seems to be an either or kind of thing, either defeat the wizard or kill his successor, so that when the old guy dies, there's no one to take the place. Kind of a choose your own adventure.
Yeah, not bad odds for Morgan Le Fay, the great. What were her nicknames that she gives herself there at the end? Like a couple different ones. She calls herself Lilith. So
yeah, you're right.
She got some more lore there.
And then, so Le Fay, we see that she possesses a young woman named Clea Lake, and she possesses her and uses her as a weapon against Lindmer, the current Sorcerer Supreme. And she basically Le Fay walks up to Lindmer, and Lindmer says, "You can't do nothing to me." And then apparently didn't. Then you have Clea come up with a weird look in her eye, and he's not too worried though, but she pushes him off the bridge.
She throws her books down. Then she's like, "Oh, I'd have been creeped out by that." Yeah. Whoa, watch it, lady.
So it's not real clear whether he died and brought himself back to life or what, but he got himself up, dusted himself off, and walked off. And then she comes to and kind of freaks out.
Yeah.
And about gets hit by a car, but so she kind of comes to, but she's been shaken. And then Lindbergh goes home, and it's here that we see Wong, who's looking after him and helping him a little bit, and he's told by Lindmer to go find Clea, or to find the lady. He's been trained by Captain America to do sketch work, and has produced a perfect sketch of Clea, which Wong uses to go find her.
Magic.
Yes. There's no databases back then, so I'm not really sure how he would have found her. But, you know.
Well, he said how did Wong find her? He knew.
Well, I think they decided that she had a pile of books, so she must be at the university.
But then he also had to know she was at that specific hospital. And he had already scoped out Strange for an earlier request, and he knew that Strange was on duty at the same time she would have checked in.
Okay.
That guy gets around, Wong does.
So we'll catch up the plot to get to that point. So she's having nightmares at this point, and she wakes up and seems to have some kind of amnesia. Almost gets hit by a taxi cab, and the taxi driver takes her to the hospital. So she's a Jane Doe at the psych hospital, and then Strange basically becomes her doctor at that point. And that's when Wong tells Linmer that he found her, and they decide to go the next day to the hospital. Or I'm sorry, he makes Linmer eat his breakfast first.
Attend to the body first. I like the Jedi mind tricks. That's pretty fun.
Yeah. So after he eats his breakfast, they go to the hospital. And Limmer uses his Jedi mind tricks to get to where he wants to go and to talk to who he wants to talk to and to get them to do what he wants them to do. And he tells Strange that he knows about him, that he knew his father. His father had died in a car wreck at 18. That we kind of decided was meant for Strange. But his father gave him a signet ring, and which is also, I guess that's the sign of light. Is that what I seem to recall hearing that?
Talking about the symbol.
Yeah.
It does kind of look like the Star Trek logo.
It's like a mix between a Star Trek logo and a cross. It's like a rose art version of a cross.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly what they're going for, but it's basically a plus sign on a circle with curvy lines. It's not a straight line, but you can Google it.
Why do you think Mr. Strange gave Stephen Strange the ring before he died in the car crash?
I don't know. I'm sure that's something they would have fleshed out in the show.
Okay.
They imply that he was taking Strange's place, and like Strange should have been in the wreck.
Oh, so he kind of knew. He was altering. He was a Marvel What If character at that point.
Possibly.
Yeah. Okay.
Possibly.
He changed the timeline, multiverse, and all that.
Yeah.
Didn't have to take his wife with him, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah. So Clea's having nightmares, and Stephen Strange is also having the same nightmares. And the nightmare is basically a reenactment of when she's possessed by the woman and pushes the guy off the bridge. So when Strange sees her, he recognizes something weird's going on. Like, I know who this is. We're sharing dreams, or I've had a dream of you. And he knows that's weird. But because of that, he is taking what she says a little more seriously, I think, than he might have otherwise. And she doesn't want to go to sleep. He says, okay, you don't have to go to sleep. But then they make her go to sleep anyway.
The other hospital staff, the visiting director, who Strange says always has a guilty conscience for some reason. That's an interesting backstory.
Yeah, they did a good job planting little things that they could play with if they had a season to work with it.
Strange always comes into the meetings late. I like that. He walks in immediately when they say his name. He just kind of walks in. I like that.
So Linmer contacts Strange in the hospital, tells him that Clea needs more help than medical science can provide. Strange is skeptical, but takes Lindmer's card, which has the same symbol as his ring. And while they're doing that, with the address. And then they kind of move scenes a little bit, and then you see Morgan Le Fay. She's trying to get into Lindmer's house, but he had put a spell on it, and she can't get in. So she possesses a cat to see if she can get the cat in the house, and that's what we were talking about earlier. It seems to have had a little static shock going on. Got repelled. And at some point, Le Fay has the opportunity to kill Strange, but she doesn't take advantage of it. I can't remember the exact placement of it, but I think it had to do with luring a little kid to get hit by a truck.
Because she thinks he's a hottie, and she ain't gonna kill that guy. She gonna convert him over. She gonna change him.
Yeah, so that's the little plot thread. They could have made it a little more clear early on what was going on there. I didn't catch it. I didn't fully appreciate that scene until later when she's being questioned by the evil entity.
Yeah, you felt like either she couldn't because, magical enchantment or whatever, but it was not clear she just really fell in love with him at that point.
So then Strange does go to visit Linmer, and he says Strange wants to know the truth. And Linmer says, I don't know if you can handle the truth. But then he gives him some of the truth, not all of it. And he says there's different realms, and that Clea's mind is trapped in one of them, while her body is here, and that's why she's kind of nuts and in a coma. And that only Strange can save her because he has the power of the ring, a la Captain Planet. And then, So he sends Strange to the astral plane, where he kind of flies around like Superman, if Superman was on psychedelic drugs.
You'll believe a man can fly.
Yeah. And he rescues old Clea.
And he fights the demon,
Strange. Well, Yeah, so he's given a strange. He's given an enchant by Strange prior to going. He says, if you say this, then whatever demon you run into will go away. And it
Very
worked.
convenient.
Yeah.
So I like. We should mention Linmer really presses him at different points as to whether Strange believes in evil, and he says no. Now he's not doing that because he's an awful guy, like you see. He just says he believes. He believes only in the betterment and the trying to the goodness of humanity, but he doesn't believe in evil. And Linmer says, very unfortunate. So that was an interesting contrast between the two men. And you never really had a big moment in this movie where Strange comes around on believing in evil, but I guess he does. A little bit missed opportunity to develop that.
I can't remember if that conversation you just described was before or after he went to the astral plane. But I feel like at that point he should have kind of had an opinion. But yeah.
You're right. After you fought a demon off, but you're still not convinced. Well, all right. Fair enough.
So this is when we have the scene where the entity asks LaFay why she spared him. She says, I like him. And then he said, well, get over it. Either kill Linman or get over it and kill him. But if you lose, you're going to turn into an old woman. I guess she really is old, so it wouldn't be so much turning her into an old woman, minus just removing the facade of her beauty as it currently stands.
I was a little bit uncertain of that moment because I thought it was a different lady. I wasn't sure that was supposed to be Jessica Walters in old makeup, but I guess it was.
That was a horrible wig.
Use that budget.
Yeah, so they either used an old woman with a weird wig and then Jennifer's voice, or they put some kind of mask on her. It's a little unclear.
Is it Jessica or Jennifer? Well, who are we talking about? Walter?
Well, I'm talking about LaFay, but the actress. Jessica Walter. So anyways, she gets threatened with that. Strange goes to check on Clea, agrees to have dinner with her. Prior to he's going to meet her at 7. So he goes and sees Linmer first, and he basically rejects the whole idea of being the Sorcerer Supreme. Says, I'm done. Don't want nothing else to do with this. And then he I don't know why he couldn't take his ring off, but he couldn't take the ring off.
That
should
have
been stupid and yeah. And then he carries a possessed cat into the house.
How rude. I mean, really.
They do make the line that he assumes that the cat lives there.
Oh, just because it's a black cat in a haunted house, he assumes that cat lives there.
Yeah. So because he picks up the cat and carries it across the doorway, it's able to get in. It goes and it beats up Wong. Looks like it kills him, but I guess not.
It does, yeah.
And then she beats Linmer and summons some demon to take him to the demon realms.
But he admits later he was playing dead.
He didn't look like he was playing dead.
He
later
did not.
on when they showed him.
Yeah. I said, ooh, that's a dead corpse right there.
Yeah.
That was a better makeup job than old Morgan Le Fay, the dead Linmer.
Yeah, it helps that he's actually old. But so old Strange gets to Clea's house, and they're ready to get their groove going on.
He's so nasty,
but
man.
Interrupts.
What's the age difference? He's 35. He says that. She's in college. I don't know if she's a grad student, but that's creepy. I'm sorry.
It was the leading up to the scene when basically she leads on and she likes him. He says, well, it'd be inappropriate for as your doctor. She's like, well, can you be my tutor? That makes it better.
Yeah, we don't know if she's a freshman, senior, whatever, but she's in NYU. And Strange is not just 35. He is a known playboy. So,
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
The 70s were a different time. Even
yes,
the 80s.
They were. Yeah.
And most of the 90s. But
yeah.
Wouldn't fly today. So anyways, LaFay interrupts, puts her back into a coma-like thing, but promises not to harm her if Doctor Strange will come with her to the demon realm and them have shenanigans.
Quite shenanigan-y.
It's a little unclear when they get there how much of a willing participant he is in this. He's definitely going along with it, but almost a little bit too much. So it's a little unclear whether or not she's got some mind control going on. Which would, I mean, either way, it makes more sense from a plot point if she's got some mind control going on.
I mean, she's wearing a very attractive dress for her age. Very flattering.
Yes, but despite all of that, all the things that come along with the dress that she was promising would not have been kind of the things that he was going for in life.
I like how
he seemed to be a genuinely good person.
They go in for a kiss, and he pulls away, and he says, "Your lips are cold." And I didn't think he'd go in for a second kiss, but he did.
He warmed him up. So she asked
strange.
him to take his. She asked him to take his ring off. He says no. Apparently that fixed him. And then he defeated her, rescued Linmer, and they go back to the Earth realm, and Wong's alive magically. And this would be, what did we say he was? A Stewie Gare? No, a Gary Stew.
Yeah.
And somehow he knows how to defeat her with all these magical powers that he doesn't know about yet.
Instinct, family genetics.
Apparently. And then we see the evil blob in the sky transform LeFay into an old hag, and she's sad.
And you'd think that's the end of her character arc here, but no, she's just getting started.
Yeah, that was a weird scene. That was like, we'll get to, I guess we'll get to it in a second. We got this one other scene for then. So Linmer talks to Strange, and Strange chooses to forego ignorance, offspring, and a painless death. And he's going to be the Sorcerer Supreme, protect humanity. And we get a green screen of transferring a power to him.
Like Ernest Saves Christmas, the Santa Claus switch. They got to do it before the sunrise.
Yeah. And the sun rises and the switch happens, and he's got a new robe that's really ugly.
Oh, it's not even a robe, it's the spandex.
Yeah. Oh, you're right, yeah.
Oh, bad.
And then Linmer warns him that with great power comes great responsibility.
Thank you, Uncle Ben.
And he's going to stick around for the rest of the series and show him how to use his power so he doesn't hurt people on accident.
So I want to add, when he's talking about the things he has to forsake, Strange challenges him at the end of that speech. And he says, what about love? Now, we know what Strange has in mind when he says, what about love? Linmer gives him an answer because he didn't like the question of, was it like humanity is love? How do you say it?
Something like that. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. He rephrased the question.
That's not the answer Strange was wanting. I'm pretty confident in that.
No, Dr. Strange was saying, look, we're modern medicine. We have contraception around here. I don't have to have an offspring. And I guess that to be resolved in a later episode.
So it's creepy again. So he's already had the walk and talk with Clea going back to the apartment. Unfortunately, when they got there, we thought we were going to have a Ghostbusters and Zool moment where, Morgan Le Fay was going to do something bad again. But now he does the whole thing again like it's Groundhog Day. I was thinking my DVD had malfunctioned. He's going through the whole motions again.
It seemed like an alternate scene or like an alternate ending, or they went back in time where Superman flew around the world backwards and turned back time. And I was thinking to myself, did they turn back time so that he could dump her? That's what initially my thought was. Like, we've done this before.
Yep.
So in the scene, Strange is back at the hospital. Apparently he's still a doctor, and they're having a meeting that he's late to, and they talk about how a bunch of patients have been discharged. So apparently he's doing a good job. And then Chloe's there, or Clea. Excuse me, I keep calling her Chloe. Yeah, I keep calling her Chloe because I think that's a more normal name. But Clea's there, and she seems to have no memory of what happened, but wants to see him again. Very similar to earlier. And then they take a walk, and they have basically verbatim the same thing about come over for dinner and help me with my work, my tutoring. And
he gets
there's no no, it's like, now he does get a little sharp with her, not rude, but very straightforward. And you think, okay, he's not answering the exact same way. It's almost like he's trying to lead her off and not have a relationship with her. But then he agrees to have dinner with her as a tutor. So it looks like that's not what's going on. I don't know. Very weird. And then they go by these televisions.
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, if this had went to series, that would have been an interesting relationship between his love interest, who doesn't remember anything, but maybe does subconsciously, and how he's going to deal with that. But go ahead, TVs, because subconscious, speaking of.
Yeah. So they go by these TVs, and LeFay is now a peddler of some kind of self-help scheme, and she's being interviewed, and basically she says, I'll take control of people's lives, and they'll be better for it.
Uh-huh.
But she's in her younger body.
Yep.
And Clea seems fascinated by her, like she kind of recognizes her. Strange tries to snap her out of it, and then, basically Clea says, that's nuts. Who would do that? So it's like she didn't quite, she wasn't still under the control or had that kind of problem, but she did seem to have some recognition. And then we have this street magician doing some stupid tricks. And then Strange turns some flowers into, what was it, a bird?
Yeah, the magician thought he was going to pull flowers out of a napkin or a ribbon or a handkerchief, but he turns out it was a white dove, and Strange was really amused with himself for doing that.
Yes, and the movie ends. So that last scene makes no sense.
Yeah, not the greatest note to drop the mic on.
And maybe they had some plans for that if they went to series. But man, I guess what happened was they wiped her mind, and she
Superman
just happened
2.
to come to the hospital. Yeah, Superman 2. And she just happens to come back to the hospital the same way that she did the first time, with the same intent. And they had the same conversation on the same street that had the same conclusion. And then he had LaFay pop up as if she hadn't been turned to an old hag.
Ugh,
It's just like, what's going on here? The scene added nothing.
no. And we never found out what happened to the calico cat that got shot. You figured she or he would come to live with one of the characters eventually.
You know, all these movies back in the day, they're really piss poor about follow up on animals that have been possessed or brought back to life. Like, don't they realize that's the most interesting part of the movie?
It is.
But yeah. So I've talked myself out of a good review now. This last scene really does kind of annoy me.
I persuaded you like Lindmer persuaded Strange on the problem of evil.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if the quality of the movie is that much different than like the Captain America 2 Death Too Soon.
Oh, that was much better. I'm judging against the first Captain America, though.
Well, in a lot of ways, they were not that far apart from each other, no. But, you know, I don't know. The pacing's weird, too much hospital scene. It wasn't far away from being a good movie.
No, it was close.
Minus the ending. Yeah, so minus the ending. The ending was horrible. But yeah.
So what's our, what scale are we using for this movie?
I feel like signet rings would be an appropriate one, but maybe not fun enough.
5 rings to rule them all?
No, I don't know. Maybe do it out of 5 inappropriate relationships.
A lot of age differences between people in this movie, yeah. I'm only giving it 2. Like, again, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it gets the thumbs down. If this were Rotten Tomatoes before they took away the crowd rating the other week.
Yeah, I'm happy with 2. It's not trash. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend watching it. There's enough interesting stuff, especially it's just the first scene, honestly, is just so weird. But I think there's enough interesting things that if you're a fan of Doctor Strange or Marvel stuff in general, it's worth taking an hour and a half to see this movie and kind of round out your history of the stuff. But it's not good, and it didn't deserve a sequel or a series.
No. Well, I would have liked to have seen a sequel. I do admit I would have liked to have seen where this went with Morgan Le Fay.
So let me back up. If this was hour-long episodes of a series, like if this had been an hour-long episode instead of an hour and a half, it probably would have been pretty good, or more interesting at least. They would have to get rid of the fluff. So maybe the series would be fine.
And Peter Hooten could have been George Clooney before George Clooney.
Yeah, he could end up being Batman.
Oh man,
he killed the series himself
with keeping the mustache like Cesar Romero kept it for the Joker.
Yeah. So it does follow up with the CBS stuff where they really don't keep a lot of source material in the movie. Though for this reason, or for this movie, I don't really understand all the why. Like, it's not like Doctor Strange has some elaborate, expensive to produce backstory.
In your opinion, even though not having read the comics, is this more or less of a comic book than the Cumberbatch Doctor Strange? And why does the new one win? So I'd say the main difference is the Cumberbatch movie goes into Far Eastern mythology and philosophy, whereas this one goes medieval, sorceresses and demons and all that. On that note, which one is more comic accurate given the source material at the time?
I'm pretty sure the new one with Cumberbatch I think they follow the source material pretty closely.
Yeah.
This one, I mean, at least they have the characters. I do understand why they went with the medieval kind of sorcery route, Dungeons and Dragons, over the other stuff, because it probably is cheaper to introduce to a 1978 audience.
Yeah, sword and sorcery was really big. You mentioned the whole Dungeons and Dragons phenomenon. Yeah, warriors.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were really going off of in terms of trying to make it successful. I'll be curious. I ordered an unofficial The Amazing Spider-Man series from back in the day, and I'll be curious to see once I have to take the time to watch one of those, see how I think that compares to this. Everyone thinks about the Great Hulk series and that crappy Spider-Man series. I'll be curious to see if, in light of Doctor Strange and the Captain America movies, how I feel about Spider-Man at that point.
Is that the one where you used a rope instead of web sling?
Well, it was web, but it was rope.
I just thought it was an obvious rope. Like, is it painted white or what color is it?
Well, he's got his spider shooters or web shooters on the outside of his gloves. Okay. So it still comes out of that, but it definitely looks more like a rope. I mean, it has to be big. It has to be a real effect that can hold the guy's weight. So yeah, I mean, it's a rope.
Yeah. All right.
But they don't call it a rope. So I'm glad they didn't make a sequel because I wouldn't want to watch it. Got any final thoughts on Doctor Strange, 1978?
I'm not sure that head nurse ever came around. But oh well.
Yeah, my takeaway is with all these movies, like, why is this so hard? It ain't brain science. It ain't rocket surgery. Like, why is it so hard to make a good comic book movie?
I like how you mixed up brain science and rocket surgery. I'm amused by that. I like it. You should put that on a t-shirt. It ain't brain science or rocket surgery. I think I've lost your vocal stream, so you can say goodnight whenever. Hey, I hear your clickies. That might be good.
That was weird.
Well, it's still going for me. I still see the recording up there.
Yeah, so it was weird. Because I don't know what I got out before it cut off. What was the last thing you heard?
I don't remember.
So, all right.
That's true.
So we'll wrap this up before we have more problems. Doctor Strange 1978, solid 2 out of 5. Thankfully, no sequels. And I think next week, if I recall, we're going to do the 1990 version of Captain America.
Yes, I'm going to find a way to watch that.
This is the one that I thought that I was going to watch when I said we were going to do the first two. And then I realized I didn't know there was 3.
Who knew?
Who knew?
The trilogy.
So that'll be fun. Well, I think you can, if I'm not mistaken, I think you can rent the Captain America movie for $3.
I'd be worried about falling asleep during it, and then I'd have to rent it again.
Normally, you get it for like 48 hours.
Oh, that's good then. Okay.
Yeah, check out Roku. I think it's on there. But all right. Well, thanks everybody.
Bye bye.